الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ونور قلوبنا وقرة أعيننا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. لا نتعلم والتعليم وتذكر وتذكر والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم ودعاء إلى الهدى ودلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى مع لطف وعافية برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما لدني ومشرب الصافي الهاني يا وهاب يا غني. اللهم إنا نسألك علما لدني ومشرب الصافي الهاني يا وهاب يا غني. اللهم إنا نسألك علما لدني ومشرب الصافي الهاني يا وهاب يا غني. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين آمين يا رب العالمين. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله. Nobody can share screen. Okay. Bismillah. Okay, no one can share screen. I will just share. But I think what is it? I'm using an ebook, and I heard that the ebook is not the same as the actual book. So I can share my screen, but I heard that it's not the same. But maybe it's not that much different, right? Okay, never mind. We just go with the ebook, I guess. Unless someone can share the real book. And I guess if there's any difference, tell me lah. This is easier. If there's any difference in the ebook than the real book, just inform me. So we've gone through with Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. That we are na'am. Okay, we're at the king, where the king is, right? Now we're right at the king. I think this where I think I remember reaching up to there. Lama, okay. I said that with the king here. Where is this? Tamam, here. Okay. So Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Tamam, let's take with Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. And Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam was further mistreated with imprisonment. Right? Actually, from a tafsir, even though he was imprisoned wrongfully, he actually requested for it. Right? He actually requested for it. He actually wanted to be imprisoned. Right? Because he loved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than anything else. Right? So he even loved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than his own freedom. Right? What is freedom if you end up disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right, so the story of Nabi Yusuf, alayhi salam, the story of true love, and true love for the Creator, subhanahu wa ta'ala, above all. Right, so would I give up my freedom for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yes. Would I give up my my position, my money, my everything in my dunya for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The answer of those who truly love is yes. Right, because the one who loves is the one who sacrifices for the one that they love. This is what love is. So as we go through these stories, right, inshallah, we will be understanding what is love more and more and more, right? Because this is what really love is. Love is selfless, right? Love is selfless. The self actually gets annihilated the more someone the more someone correctly loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, there are people whose self get annihilated, in their love for other human beings or others in the creation, that their self gets removed. And this this is why I need to put in the condition, right, that the self gets annihilated, right, in their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because the self can get annihilated in loves for other things, and that's not healthy, and that's not good, and that's not correct, and that is destructive to a human being. So that, for example, people in their love for money, right, their self actually gets annihilated, right? They actually, they go into, they go into a form of craziness in seeking money, in working in searching for money, to the point that their health deteriorates, right? Their happiness deteriorates, right? Everything about themselves, goes downhill, right? Because they want their bank account to go up, right? And that is, you said, that is a kind of obsession, right? I don't know if you want to call it love, right? But obsession, right, that causes for itself to be disregarded, and for something that is unhealthy, right? Something that that will ruin a human being, right? It's a sickness. Right? Some people, they just love seeing, their bank account having a lot of money inside there, and there are people who they love for position, they love for popularity, they love for fame, they love for, this the dunyawi, the glamour, right? That they would destroy everything of themselves and others. They would destroy the relationships around them. They would destroy also their health as well. They would destroy, even their physical bodies if they want to make themselves look, better and better with all this kind of plastic surgery. So you see how, love can lead to us to you, disregarding yourself, right? But and if it's for the sake of something that is other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that is sick and that is destructive. That is a disease and illness, right? That this person is fallen into. But if it's in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then it is positive. Then it is. She's hungry now. She's hungry. She's hungry. I'll feed her later, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. She's not. Just fed her. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Naam. Right. Allahumma salli Sayyidina Muhammad. Now, right. So if your self is annihilated, right, in your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that is what you are aiming for. That is what you want, right? You want that, right? So in a sense, one goes into sleep deprivation because why? Because they want to pray the night. Because why? Because they love being in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, his feet began to swell. Right? Why? Because he was grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he felt compelled. Right? It was not that he forced himself, but he loved to. Like he loved to, spend the night and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are people who, of the Sahaba, right, whereby they would, go through the extreme difficulty, right, just for our Prophet, our beloved, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, and completely, ignoring their own, the needs of their own self. And that is what, it is in the hadith, is described as true iman, that that the Prophet ﷺ becomes more beloved to you than yourself, your wealth, and every single thing that you have, and even the very self of yours between your two sides. Right? So there is a love for the Prophet ﷺ, and these kind of loves, like whereby the self is annihilated, right, in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the love of the Prophet ﷺ, these kind of loves are positive. These kind of loves build. These kind of loves last. These kind of loves will have an eternal, a bliss, right, in the hereafter. Right? So you see Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, right, that what compelled him, right, to, ask to be imprisoned. In a sense, he's giving up his freedom, right? He's giving up his freedom. Why? Because he loved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because he loved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he does not want to fall into sin against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So he literally gave up his freedom, right? He gave up his status, right? Because he was not a slave boy, even though they kept calling him, the kid in the house, or the Zulaykha's kid, right? But he was actually raised by the Aziz, like into a position, like in the home, in the palace. He was actually raised because it is mustahil for prophets to be, held at a low position. It's mustahila. It is impossible for prophets to be held at a lower position. So Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, we don't say that he was ever a slave. He was not a slave. And from the moment he was bought, when he was bought in the marketplace, the Aziz, by his statement that we shall benefit from him or take him as a son, right, the Aziz had raised Nabi Yusuf's position into being, a boy in the house, right, into being, one of the Sayyid, right, one of the, the kids of the household, right. But it was just that Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, he gave up all that out of his fear of sin, right? Out of his fear of sin, mashallah. And that is love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give up, what people, what people run after. And how many people, how many young men, right, would actually, welcome a life of sin. If this meant money, it meant prestige, it meant position. Like how many of them would actually, in our zaman, right? They would, go after Zulaykha, and she was beautiful. Even though she was older, she was beautiful. I do go after Zulaykha, and in doing that, you get a beautiful woman, right? That you didn't have to marry. Right? There was this our zaman, and our zaman of people who have all kinds of sicknesses, right? And then have money, right? And have position. How many people would actually want to do that? In our zaman, but Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, because he's a prophet alayhi salam, and he only sees one, and he sees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He only wants to please one, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we take the lesson here, right here, at the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, of giving up, whatever we have, right? If it means or being more than ready to give up whatever we have, this dunya, even of ourselves, if it means bringing pleasure, bringing the happiness, gaining the love of Allah and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is what mashallah, the righteous of the past, right? They would do, and they would say, and they would hold on to, in spreading the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if it meant their limbs being cut off one by one, even if it meant them losing, the losing popularity amongst the people hating them, even if it meant all of that, they didn't care. They literally didn't care, because it is all that mattered to them was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loving them for what they are doing. And mashallah, Sayyidina Habib is one of the Sahaba. He's not Habib Umar or anyone. One of the Sahaba, his name is Sayyidina Habib. Right, his name is Habib, and his name is actually Habib. Sayyidina Habib, his story, his famous story, right, whereby there was a tyrannical king, and it was going to kill him, and then the king says to him, right, would you prefer that Muhammad is in your position right now, right, and you are free, right, with your wife and your children? And Habib said, I would not even want that Muhammad or my Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam be pricked with a thorn, and I am with my wife and my children. I won't even want for him to be pricked with a thorn, much less be in my position to be killed. But rather, they would love, right, and to give. And some of them, some of the Sahaba would cry, and when the king would think that, oh, we got you, you're crying, you're scared of death. And then they would say, no, rather we are crying, right, because we wish we had 1,000 lives to give in the way of Islam, like in the way of my Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But we only have one life to give, if we only had 1,000 lives to give in this way, like in the way of Islam. MashaAllah. Right, so this is our lesson here, right? What if we sacrifice? Right, in our zaman, people would even sacrifice their jobs for the prayer. They wouldn't even sacrifice their jobs for the prayer, right? And they would just say, okay, you know what, Allah is all forgiving, that Allah knows it's difficult, Allah knows, mashallah, may Allah have mercy on us and forgive us. Yes, where is our sacrifice? And where is our sacrifice? Right? You miss one of your 5 prayers. Right? It is not worth it. It is not worth it. On the day of judgment, you will see it is not worth it. And it was not worth whatever the salary of the job. It was not worth any of that. Right? If you understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Razzaq, the one who provides, right? That we know that our prayer is above even $1 billion job. Like our prayer is above that. And how many men, right, miss their Friday prayers, right? And they place it as, their job is above their Friday prayers. These are things that are wajib in our religion. Right? So it is for us to think, right, that what is the most important thing in our life, right? And to show Allah sincere love for Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you show Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincere love by how you sacrifice, right, of your dunya for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alhamdulillah, right? So Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, he was imprisoned, right? He did request to be imprisoned, right? But it was there was a zulm done on him, in a sense that Zulaikha had or the Aziz, it was the Aziz. If you go into the tafsir of it, the Aziz had, he had to get Nabi Yusuf to be imprisoned, right? He had because in the Quran, Allah quotes Nabi Yusuf saying, he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Sijnu ahabbu ilayya," right? Prison is more beloved to me than what they're calling me to, right? So Nabi Yusuf had wanted to go into prison, right? But it was that the tafsir goes that the Aziz actually had to make up something, to make up some form of reason why Nabi Yusuf had to be imprisoned. So there was a lie against Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam to get him to be imprisoned, because the Aziz could not control his wife. Like he literally could not control his wife, and it was humiliating for him that he could not control his wife. And it was humiliating when the wife kept going after Nabi Yusuf. And he said she was not remorseful. Like she was obsessed. And she was not remorseful, and she had no shame whatsoever. And she kept going after Nabi Yusuf in front of her husband. And she kept doing that. Right. So it was it was so disturbing, like may Allah protect us from such, craziness, whereby a person could not care about their dignity, they could not care about their muru'ah, their position, they couldn't care even about their status, right? And they kept running after something so low, something so sexual and so low, right? And they shove everything aside. And so there's a form of obsessive love, or just a sickness, like, in a human being. So Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, he went to prison, under also the accusation, because he's completely clean, right? But he preferred it. He preferred it. And of course, the story of the prison continues, and then the men that came to the prison and so on. All of this you can find in Tafsir Surah Yusuf alayhi salam, and you can find it in my YouTube. And so until one day, the king of Egypt had a strange dream. No one could interpret it but Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, and the king sent for him, and Nabi Yusuf said, ask about what really happened to the women who cut their hands. Because on top of it also was because Zulaikha was running after Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. The women now were all running after Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? So this is why he had to run away. And he was like, Satan is more beloved to me than what they're calling me to. Like, it's not no, it's not just Zulaikha I have to fend off. Right? It's all these women, all these women that are running after me. I gotta run away from them. Right. So the only way was to give up his freedom, in his position, and just to be locked behind bars, right? In a sense, to lock the woman out, right? To lock the woman away from him, subhanAllah, and so for ourselves, right? Apply to ourselves. How many things are haram, right, in our lives? Right? Can we lock them out of our lives? So we lock the haram out of our lives, lock parts of our phone, or delete some apps, lock parts of our life, delete some movies or whatever that we watch, delete all of them. In fact, stop any subscription, right, to Netflix, right, delete the whole thing, remove it. Like, what can we do? Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam literally put himself behind bars, right, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for us, we keep making excuses as to what we're watching, what we're addicted to, what we want to do, and the hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us, understanding, and really walk the way of the righteous. What are you sacrificing? One beautiful example that has come to my mind right now about, one of the Sahaba that I really love, one of my most favorite Sahabi, and what he sacrificed for the sake of Islam is Sayyidina Mus'ab bin Umair. I said that Mus'ab bin Umair is one of the, like, subhanallah. I said that Mus'ab bin Umair, just think about him, right, and how much he gave up. Right? He was literally like a celebrity, right, in Mecca, like the finest young man, right, in Mecca, the finest of the youth, right, in Mecca. He had the finest clothes. He never wore the same clothes twice. Right? He had the best clothes. His mother would clothe him. He had the best perfume and the most expensive one. He was the most handsome young man. Right? Walking, around in Mecca, people were admiring him. Right? His mother made sure he was like a celebrity. Right? In Mecca, and he gave away all of that. And he gave away all of that, all of what he was known for, right, for the sake of Islam. And his sacrifice was so beautiful that it brought our beloved Prophet ﷺ to tears, seeing Zainab Mus'ab bin Umair. Where Rasulullah once saw Zainab Mus'ab bin Umair, and he was wearing, a cloth around his waist. Right? Hardly any, he was wearing rags, basically, he was wearing rags. And the sight of Zainab Mus'ab, after Islam, after he came into Islam, the sight of Zainab Mus'ab in rags, it brought Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to tears, and to tears out of feeling so touched. How a human being, how a person could give up all that just because they love Allah and His Prophet, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And just because they love Allah and His Prophet, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So when Rasul saw Sayyidina Mus'ab come into the gathering, and he was dressed in rags, he couldn't contain himself, and he began to weep. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam began to weep. And he said that I've seen a day, and it's from before, where Mus'ab, this man, Mus'ab, he walked around Mecca in the finest clothes and the finest perfume, the finest everything. He'd be dressed up so finely. We saw a day when he was like that. And now we see a day when he is wearing his rags. And all he left for the sake of Allah and his Prophet. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That is true love, right there. Right there. That is true love. Right? They don't care. They don't care what they have to leave. Right? If it brings the pleasure and the love of Allah and his Prophet. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Right. So Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, if you go to the tafsir of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, is that when the king, so basically he helped one of the people, one of the inmates in the prison, and he told the inmate to tell the king about him, because the thing what it was that the Aziz had locked him up in the prison, right? And they kind of forgot about him there, right? Because he was not serving a sentence, right? So since he was not serving a sentence, there was no end to his sentence. There was no sentence, right? So it was corrupted, and he was placed in prison in a corrupt manner, right? And he had no sentence to serve. So he was kind of in there, without end. Right, so he didn't get out. He didn't kind of sit there in prison. He's a prophet. He wants to do his da'wah, right? So he says to one of his inmates who he helped. He told him, you're gonna live. You're gonna work in the palace of the king. And he says to his friend, to his prisoner, right? Mention my name to the king. Tell the king about me. But this guy forgets about Nabi Yusuf altogether until the king gets a strange dream. Then the guy goes, oh yes, there's someone in the prison who knows how to read dreams, and he knows how to interpret dreams. Right, and then those who they sent for Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, and Nabi Yusuf interprets the dream correctly, and the king is impressed. The king sends for Nabi Yusuf to be brought out of prison, right, to serve the king, because the king realizes that this guy in the prison, right, he has very, very precious skill. He's able to interpret dreams accurately, right? It's precious skill, right? So the king realizes that this is someone he wants by his side, right? So but Nabi Yusuf alayhi now he uses the king's interest in him to his advantage, right? And he refuses to come out of prison, see again, subhanallah, because his love for truth, right? His love for truth. And his love for truth is not so much that he wants to clear his name, but it's because he has foresight, and that he sees that he needs to take up position in the government as the Minister of Finance. Because Nabi Yusuf eventually says to the king, make me in charge of the stores of the land, right? Meaning when people harvest, because the story of the king was that he had this dream about the skinny cows, the fat cows, skinny cows putting out fat cows, and he had he saw 7 green ears of corn, and then 7 that were dried, right? So the king had seen this in his dream, right? And so Nabi Yusuf's interpretation was that for 7 years of this, you're going to harvest, plentifully, like, and then after the 7 years of harvest, of rain and harvest, it's going to be 7 years of terrible drought, right? And so Nabi Yusuf gave the suggestion that you should, in the 7 years of harvest, if plentiful rain and harvest, you should store the foods, right, or the harvest from these years, and eat only a little bit and store the rest, don't waste it, right? And then the years of drought, you're going to eat from your stores, right? So Nabi Yusuf had actually given this interpretation, right? And Nabi Yusuf had the intelligence, as all prophets do. They have fatana, right? They have very keen intellect, they're very sharp intellect, right? They had the intelligence to know that someone needs to handle like these the grains and the stores. Someone must handle the stores, and the one who's going to handle the stores has to be someone who is upright, not corrupt, and also knowledgeable in mathematics, and to know what percentage should be eaten and what percentage should be stored, and even how to distribute the stores throughout the 7 years for them to last, right? And Nabi Yusuf saw that there would be none other, who is fit for the job except himself. Right? And that is where we get the if someone were to see that they are the only one, right? They're the only ones who can take the job, then they can and they must step up, especially if they see that if they didn't step up, then someone else who is corrupt and whose corruption will harm other people, right? If you vote for them, that corrupt individuals will take the position, for example, right? So in this situation, it becomes wajib on them to step up, because otherwise, more harm will come to society and people will suffer. right, at the hands of a corrupt leader, right? So Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, he saw that this entire dream, right, meant in this dream told him that there's going to be 7 years of drought, and that's severe, right? 7 years of not a drop of rain. That is severe, right? And if the stores were not looked after properly, right, this would lead to death, right? People die in famine, in the thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dying because of no water for 7 years. Right? So Nabi Yusuf saw that he has to take the position. He has to be in charge of the grains. And he has to be in charge of the stores, right? And control it properly. Right? So no one, will in a sense, no one will corrupt and misuse it for their own gain. Right? So Nabi Yusuf saw that, for him to be there, right, right, he needs to clear his name first. Because otherwise, people will be seeing that this guy just came out of prison. He was some criminal and inmate, right? And then suddenly he's now in government positions, right? So people in society will not trust him because he was just in prison. Right? But he was in prison because of he was slandered against, right? And he was put there unjustly. He didn't do anything wrong, right? But the people don't know. People in Egypt did not know that Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, right, was prison wrongfully. Right? So this is why Nabi Yusuf sought to clear his name. Right? There is a reason why he sought to clear his name, right? So that people will realize that he was not, deserving of being placed in prison. He was wrongfully treated, right? And that he is someone who is noble, upright, righteous, right? And therefore he is fully qualified, right, to look after or to handle the affairs of the finances of the country, the food in the country, especially, right, in this situation. So you see what Nabi Yusuf is trying to do, right? So this is why he is clearing his name. Okay, just to understand, I'm going to do a lot of tafsir in the story. Right? But it's interesting for us to understand that why Nabi Yusuf wanted them to know the truth. And why did he bother after all these years to try and clear his name? And because he saw, and the whole thing goes into being selfless. And the whole thing really goes into being selfless, that he saw for the benefit of the human of the society, of the people of Egypt, right, that he needs to be the one in charge, right, over the grain. Otherwise, someone will misappropriate, what is in their hands of that grain, right? So he saw that he has to be in charge. Then he saw that it is difficult on them to accept someone who was just in prison, right, to be a minister over their, over their food, right? And if, especially they know that they show the dream that there's going to be 7 years of drought, right? So then, and then they all the more they'll feel no confidence, right, in that now the guy who's looking after our our food stock is someone who just came out of prison. Right? I mean, people will be like, how could it be? How could we even trust him? He was a criminal, right? Nabi Yusuf had to clear his name. He was never a criminal, right? But he was mistreated, right? So he wasn't able to truth. The woman replied that they knew nothing wrong about Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, so they cleared his name, right? And in the end, the wife of the former minister, right, of his former minister, Aziz, admitted that she was the one at fault, that she wished to repent. Right? Some books of tafsir, right, mentioned that after her death of her husband, she married Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, and Allahu alam. Right, so the part about Zulaikha marrying Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, that part we say Allahu alam, right? Allahu alam on that, because there are many opinions of that. Allahu alam, I will not put on to that. Right, whether or not Zulaikha actually married Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. Allahu alam. I know it's something that is widespread. People say Zulaikha and Yusuf, and it could be Israeli. It could be, and a lot of our tafsir has stuff from the Jews, right, in there. You will be surprised, right? A lot of tafsir that is around has stuff from the Jewish generations, and you wouldn't wonder why. Allahu alam. I guess the scholars have their reasons why they might put in stuff from the Jews, right? Well, Allahu alam. Now, so through this story, we learn about true love and redemption because of his true love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and patience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything was taken away from him by others. Everything that was taken away from him by others was returned to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I actually think, they're going to mention it soon, inshallah, with regards to the love between him and his father, Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam. I would say that would be a stronger focus in the entire story, right, than Zulaikha. But she took the example of Zulaikha. But I would actually like to focus more on the love between Nabi Yusuf and Nabi Yaqub, as a love between father and son. Right, there will be a more beautiful love to focus on. Right, and the one with Zulaikha was not actually love, but it was obsession by Zulaikha. Right, but of course the love that shown, right, that was shown that it shined through was the love of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that he gave up all of these temptations, right, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as said in the hadith that one of the 7 people, right, who will be shaded out, who will be shaded in the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the shade of the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment, is a man who is tempted. Right, a man, I mean, it can go both ways. So a man who is tempted, right, by a woman of beauty and status, right, and position, right, but and to commit the haram, like, and he says, I fear Allah. He stops himself and says, I fear Allah. He's one of those people who will be shielded on the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's, under the shield of Allah's throne in the day of judgment. Now, but I want to get to the Nabi Yaqub's part, because I think I want to spend some time there as well. Because I would say that there is a stronger love story. The story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, a stronger love story, the story of Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam. Now, so through this story, we learn that true love and redemption, because of his true love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and patience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything was taken away from him by others, was returned to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam was rewarded with a position in the kingdom, right? Allahu Alam, if you call it a reward. I was thinking, prophets, they don't care for dunya. They don't actually care for dunya, right? They don't care for position as well, right? And that if you look at the tafsir that Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, he only took position because he feared it being abused by someone else. He feared that if it was not him who took that position, right? And in fact, he volunteered himself. He said to the king, "Oh king," because the king says to him, "Yusuf, be my right hand man." And Nabi Yusuf says to him, "But rather, I want to be over the stores of the earth." So he rejected a higher position of being the right hand man of the king. He rejected that position. He said, "No, make me over the stores. Place me over the stores." So you see a person, right, with his love for the ummah, and his love for human beings, for the people, that he rejected a higher position that will serve his nafs, that will serve himself, makes him comfortable, and puts him in a high position right next to the king. He let go of that, right? He sacrificed that, right? He didn't want that, right? Because he saw that another position is essential for him to go after. Or to take on, which was to take care of the stores of the earth. And that is hard labor. It's just really hard labor, to be the one in charge, of the stores of the earth of the country, the finance minister, basically. He was a finance minister, right? So he was gonna, ensure that how much of the harvest came in. He was going to ensure that it all was in the storehouses, and he was going to ensure that none of his workers were corrupt, taking out the food, to be sold to their families. And he's going to ensure that the accounting, right, it all tallies. Right? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work as compared to being the king's right hand man who is sitting there and is interpreting dreams. Right? So Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, and it's not so much that he was rewarded with a position. He was actually given a higher position, and he requested for a lower position, right? Because he saw that it was important he be there, right? It was important that he be there, right? On the ground, and ensuring the grain was collected and preserved, and stored. And then when the years of the drought hit, he ensured, right, that when it was distributed and given out, right, it was only given out to an amount, so it will not be used up in 7 years, right? So it's going to last for 7 years, right? It takes a lot of responsibility, a lot of accounting, a lot of, they use a lot of brain work, right, a lot of physical work as well, in that he would go around the storehouses and ensure, that what is being collected, what is being preserved, is not being stolen or taken by anybody. around. See that? So Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, mashallah, you see sacrifice upon sacrifice upon sacrifice, right? And this sacrifice that we see here is this love for the people, right? Because they can't survive, right? If someone were to steal the grain or someone were to be corrupt in the government and start taking the grain and leaving the people to suffer. And that's basically what happens, in positions where people given, higher ranking positions, officials, where they take wealth, wrongfully, and the people and those who will suffer will be the common person. Right? So whenever a government, right, takes wealth wrongfully, immediately the ones who suffer are the common people. They are the ones who bear, the weight of the financial burden, because the government takes more than what they deserve, or and what they should take. So mashallah, Nabi Yusuf had to ensure that nobody was doing that, for the sake of the people. So his love for, his people, not even his people, they were Egyptians, right? He was not an Egyptian. His love for the people, his humanity as a whole, right? That they survived the famine. Now, right, so his brothers who threw him into the well was sent to him in the time of need. He recognized them, but did not recognize him. Right, at this point, they were at his mercy, and the food was in his hand. He saved his brothers, and he taught them forgiveness and compassion. Okay, here I think he went through very fast the story of the brothers. Okay, I'm going to spend a bit of time here. Okay, so the story of the brothers of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, and mashallah, the story of Surah, the entire Surah Yusuf, from start to end, is one story. Right? It says it's one prophet. Of course, many stories in his lifetime, but it's the story of one prophet, and Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. Right? And mashallah, was mentioned that that surah was revealed. Right? Some of the scholars say, right, that it was as if Allah was showing to the Quraysh, right, that if Allah wants to send a surah, like one single surah, like to relate a story start to end, he could do so. He could do so. Because majority of the surahs, the stories are, here and there, and just glimpses of stories, just to drive forward or drive home a point. Right? So Allah mentions stories, right, to illustrate the point that He's making in the Quran. Right? But Surah Yusuf is of course with Surah Nuh, but Surah Nuh it's not the full story of Nabi Nuh alayhi salam, but Surah Yusuf is the full story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam from start to end. Right, from start to end, the full story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. So Allah showed, and if Allah wanted to, He could make an entire surah, the story of one prophet, if He wanted to. But His wisdom, His divine wisdom, that He makes the stories, separated, right, bits and pieces all over the Quran, right? Because the stories are there to illustrate the point that Allah is driving across for us to understand. That is why the stories are being told. It's not for us to just, oh, interesting story, no, but it is for us to, get the lesson that's there in the story, mashallah. So, regards to the brothers, right? Now we see this. Now we see a forgiving love. Okay, we see a forgiving love, right? So Nabi Yusuf's love for his brothers, and this is a very powerful love. And this is really love fillah. It's love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No matter what the brothers had done to Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, he does not want for them to suffer in the hereafter. That is love. That is love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That is love for, the creation for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they had done terrible things to him. Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. None of us had anyone ever, take us when you were young and throw us in a well, and leave us there in the darkness of the well when you're a child. And no one has done that to you. Right, and then you're taken and sold into slavery, and all these problems happen to you, and the entire while for years you're separated from your parents. Nabi Yusuf was orphaned from his mother. His mother passed away when he was young, but he was separated from his father, his beloved father. Right, so this would really, for any other human being, right, this would really, cause for resentment, right, to brew in the heart of human beings against, your oppressor who has done this to you, right? But it is by love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he saw the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he rose in his akhlaq of everything. And when he saw his brothers, straight away he recognized them. but he did not want to, expose himself just yet and show them that it's him, Yusuf, right? Because he again, his intellect, is all intellect, right? They have very strong, foresight. He knew that, or he suspected that if he had, shown himself, right, and told his brothers from the very beginning, hey, I'm Yusuf, right? You guys are my brothers, I'm Yusuf, right? If he had done that, the brothers would do whatever they could, right, to silence him or to ignore him or to run away, right? And because they don't want their father to find out. Right? Remember, they made the story about Nabi Yusuf, and they made up a story that he was eaten by the wolf, right? So they didn't want Nabi Yaqub to find out, right, that Nabi Yusuf is still alive. So they would actually, cut off, right, themselves from, they don't come to Egypt ever again because, oh, Yusuf is in Egypt. We're not going to go there ever again. And they're not going to tell Yaqub anything, right? So Nabi Yusuf had this, ingenious plan, which eventually led to them having to tell Nabi Yaqub, right, they found Yusuf. They found Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. It was ingenious. You see, this is why you say, ta'anni, it's called ta'anni in Arabic, it's a trait of the prophets. Right? Ta'anni is to take very calculated steps. It's a beautiful trait, right? Very, like, really calculated steps. So, how many of us, if you were to be, lost from your family for a long time, and even family that who actually did wrong to you, and it was their reason, it was because of them that you got lost from your family for a long time, and when you find them, wouldn't you straight away say, hey, I'm your brother, right? You guys threw me away. You guys threw me into the well. I mean, how many of us would straight away, jump at it and just say things without thinking that this is not the best thing to do right now, right? Because these people tried to get rid of me. If I told them who I was, right, they're not gonna let me reunite with my father. And he wanted that. He needed to find a plan, a way to reunite with his father, right? Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam, right? With the understanding that his father is someone who is aged, right? Severely aged, right? And at the same time, with understanding that he can't leave his position as the minister over the food stocks in Egypt, because the people, not just only those in Egypt, but actually those around Egypt, because people from other countries or other lands were coming to Misr, right? Because they heard that there's a lot of food in Misr, right? Because Nabi Yusuf's very clever way of saving the food, that not only was it enough to feed people of Misr, right? It could feed people outside of Misr. That's why his brothers appeared in Egypt, right? Because they were in a drought too. Right? The drought had affected many lands, right? So people even outside of Egypt, right, were coming and getting the food from Egypt. They were buying the food, right, from Egypt, right? Needing that food because of Nabi Yusuf's, very high intellect, that he knew how to do it so well that he could even feed other, societies or people. Mashallah. So anyway, just bring the story here. Right. So Nabi Yusuf, in what he saw of his brothers, and again, with his meeting with his brothers and his conversations with his brothers, there was a point whereby the brothers continued in their, hatred. You could see that the brothers still had their hatred and their jealousy against Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, because in the point in the story, it's of us to understand really how, like you say, how big-hearted Nabi Yusuf is, how his character is so expansive, right? So wide in character, his heart, that someone, or these people, these brothers of his, did so much wrong to him, even in his face right now as adults. They continued their lies against Nabi Yusuf, because there was a point whereby when they first came, Nabi Yusuf recognized them, right? And Nabi Yusuf says to them, because they actually request for, an extra bag of food, and saying that they have a younger brother, right? A younger brother that they have to give the food for, right? So Nabi Yusuf said to them, bring him. I bring him, and you can have his share of food for him. It's a whole sack of grain. It's a whole sack of grain. So it's a lot of food. It's not like a small sack. It's a huge sack of grain. Right. So because Benjamin or Binyamin, Binyamin, who is Nabi Yusuf's full brother, he's the only who's the full brother of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam. Nabi Yaqub, after the disappearance of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, he did not allow for Binyamin to go anywhere. Right, Binyamin was only allowed to stay in the home of Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam. Right, so the story goes that Nabi Yusuf says to the brothers, right, go and bring in your younger brother here for him to get his share, because I need to see who are the people whom you're claiming that you have in the home. Right, so we must see and to account for how many people to give the food to. And so eventually, long story short, they finally got Nabi Yaqub to, it was Nabi Yusuf actually, in fact. Nabi Yusuf, who knew his father very well, he knew how to get to his father to allow for Binyamin to travel. We're going to go through the tafsir, you see us go through it very, very much in detail. So what Nabi Yusuf did, because a brother said, well, we can convince our father to let us take Binyamin. They couldn't. They actually couldn't. They tried to. They tried to convince Nabi Yaqub. Nabi Yaqub just turned away from them, saying that you failed with Yusuf. I'm not going to trust you with Binyamin, right? To the brothers, right? So, but it was Nabi Yusuf's planning that eventually pulled on Nabi Yaqub, and Nabi Yaqub eventually gave in and allowed them to take Binyamin with them for a second trip, which Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam set up like a plan, right? And he had Binyamin in on the plan, whereby he was going to frame Binyamin for theft. He was going to frame Binyamin for theft so that he can hold on to Binyamin, right? And this would eventually lead to the brothers going into a panic, right? And then them going back to their father, and the father said, "Go back, right, and search for Yusuf and Binyamin." Right? The father actually now Nabi Yaqub, he knows that Yusuf is around, but he knows he's not dead. Right, so they come back and they cry to Nabi Yusuf and seek his mercy, right? And his love for his brothers come up again at this point. And there was a point whereby he informed them that he's Yusuf, right? That he's Yusuf. And eventually they are at his mercy, and they realize how good he's been to them, right? That they oblige, right, in his request, saying, "Bring my father to me," right? Bring my father to me. And that was what he wanted, which was uniting himself to be united with Nabi Yaqub alayhi salam. Just the commentary about Binyamin was that, so when Binyamin was so-called caught, right, stealing, it was staged, and by Nabi Yusuf himself, it was staged. Binyamin was in on it. So when he was caught stealing at that point in time, the brothers had the audacity, right, to say, "Oh, if he's a thief, it's because he had a brother before who was a thief," right? And we read about the Quran, you're like, why did they have to say that? Like, subhanallah. After all these years, that's the thing about it. Diseases of the heart, ills of the heart can really stay in people for a very long time, even when the person that they had the disease towards is gone, not in their lives. But that hatred, right, that's brewing in their heart all these years. And the only way to get rid of the disease of the heart, right, is to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ratify your faith to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do a lot of istighfar and tawbah, right? Not get rid of the one that you are jealous of, right? Not get rid of the one, don't think, "Oh, I get rid of the one I'm jealous of, and then I'll be better." And that is exactly what they said, in their planning to get rid of Yusuf. They say, "Kill Yusuf or throw him far away," right? And then your father will be freed of him and he'll focus on you, right? It's a terrible plan, right? Because Nabi Yaqub never forgot Nabi Yusuf, like, and then one of them says, "Don't kill Yusuf, but throw him into a well," right? And then later we're gonna be good, okay? We're gonna be good later. Right? This is what people think. They think that the illnesses in their hearts can be gotten rid of by getting rid of the person it is directed towards. No, you have something inside of you that's toxic. It's inside of you, it's part of you, right? You need to cure that, not by getting rid of people, but by getting rid of this thing in your heart that's there. So the brothers of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, we can see it manifest again when they are in front of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, who is a minister. They have no idea it is Nabi Yusuf, right? Their younger brother Binyamin was caught stealing, they could just keep quiet, and just apologize for what just happened and try to make a compensation about it. But no, the first word that came from their mouth, because they had they had so much love of their self, that they saw the need to run down Binyamin and Binyamin's family, meaning like, okay, they all have brothers, right? So it's his side, like he's of a different mother, right? And he had a brother of the same mother as him, and that brother was a thief as well, right? So it was, how people would do that, right? Saying that they kind of disown someone, right? Because they want to save their own face, right? They want to save their own faces. They want to show that they are better in some way, right? So when like someone close to them, their friend or their family, does something that is wrong and they're caught, they're like, okay, I have nothing to do with this person, right? We are not really very close, right? Maybe she's my sister, yes, but like she's different. They kind of thing. Like you try and do it like a form of disowning, right? Because you don't want the blemish on that person to reach you. It's a love of the self. There is a love of the self that's going on there, right? So the brothers were doing that. If you're wondering what was their motive and what pushed them into, out of nowhere, saying a lie about Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, saying that, oh, if Binyamin stole, he had a brother from before who was also a thief. Like what pushed them into saying that? Like the story of Yusuf is finished in their view, right? They got rid of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam years ago. So why years later they saw a need to actually do this slander, against Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, and what was there to benefit from? There was no one there, right? Well, why did they say that statement? What did they benefit from? The only thing they benefited from was to clear their name, right? That Aziz would still respect and honor them, right? Because Binyamin's not one of them. Okay, Binyamin's not one of them. He's a thief. He had a brother from before who's also a thief. Right? We are like half brothers from a different part of the family, right? So we're not connected. That was what they were doing. Right? And then the one that they're lying to, they're slandering is right in front of them. And Nabi Yusuf right there, right? And Nabi Yusuf in the Quran also says Nabi Yusuf controlled himself, right? Nabi Yusuf controlled himself, and he says to them, "You all are on a terrible, terrible position." Right? Of course, he didn't realize what Nabi Yusuf meant when he said that you're on a terrible position, you guys. Subhanallah. So anyway, right? So anyway, the story goes that Nabi. So they did. So eventually, the end of the story is that they do bring their father to Egypt, right? And here we see love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After all that Nabi Yusuf went through his brothers, even the very last slander against his name, right? That they called him a thief. In front of his face, they said that he was a thief. He still had mercy on his siblings. Right? They had no mercy on him, but he still had mercy on his brothers, right? And that is a great individual with love, true love for his family members, true love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore so that here you see love manifesting in the form of mercy, right? We've gone through different types of how love manifests. I just spoke a bit earlier about selfishness, right? How it becomes about selflessness, selflessness, how love manifests as selflessness, right? And now how love manifests as mercy, right? Mercy and forgiving. He forgave them after all the harm that they afflicted upon him. It was redemption where things came to full circle. His father's eyesight that was gone because of him missing the scent and the embrace of his son. By the way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returned to him by the smell of Nabi Yusuf's shirt, and Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam was finally reunited with his father and his not his real mother, but his like you would say the father's other wife. Right? It was the Nabi Yusuf's real mother passed away when he was young. Right. So it was the mother of the brothers. Right? Nabi Yusuf and Nabi Yaqub had married sisters. So he married one after another. They were both sisters. In the Sharia of Nabi Yaqub, that was permissible, right, to marry two sisters at the same time. In the Sharia of Rasulullah, that is not permissible. You cannot marry two sisters at the same time, but you can marry one after another, like what Sayyidina Osman did. He married Sayyidah Ruqayya first, and she passed away. Then he married Sayyidah Kulthum. But in the Sharia of Rasulullah SAW, it is not allowed for a man to marry sisters at the same time. Right? But in the Sharia of Nabi Yaqub, it was allowed. Now, alhamdulillah. Nice. Okay, we have 4 more minutes. I'm supposed to do some of the maqasid, but I think I will just continue. There's only 4 more minutes. So I'll just continue with the use of alayhi salam, and next week, inshallah, we can go into maqasid. Tamam, the lessons, the first lesson, harm is inescapable, right? Harm is inescapable. There will be people who are supposed to care for you, but they will not. Like, there will be people who will steal from you. There will be people who will harbor jealousy or ill feelings towards you, even amongst your own flesh and blood. There are examples. These are examples in the Quran, right? So first and foremost, right, you're in the dunya. You are in the dunya, right? Will there be people who will betray you? Yes, because the prophets had people who betrayed them. Will there be people who will harm you of your own flesh and blood? Yes, definitely, because the prophets had those people come and harm them directly, right? And how are you going to respond to these people? And how are you going to respond to these people? You respond to them with mercy and love, right? As how the prophets did. Right? And the prophets are there in our lives, right? In the stories in the Quran, right? For us to take examples from and to learn from. Mashallah. Last year I had someone ask, not last year, a few weeks ago, right? Someone asked me a question about, or she was just talking to me about, her mother and how difficult it is, to be around her mother. Her mother has, issues that she has a lot of issues. So and it's very painful, right, to actually, bear the words of her mother. Her mother is very sharp in the tongue, right, against her, right, especially, right, and she, like, it's just so, negative, right, it's a very negative environment, right, and the thing about it is that as Muslims, right, we need to be able, right, to, we need to be able to block off negativity, because that is what our Prophet ﷺ did. He was surrounded by very negative people, very negative individuals, and people that you can't even run away from, right? Because for him, it was society. It was Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, the society that was very negative towards him. He went to Medina, and the Munafiqun were there, and the hypocrites were right there in the masjid. He was a leader, and he did not want to, push people out of the masjid, but so he allowed for them to come and sit in his presence, and he knew that they were all hypocrites, right? So, he had to be in their presence. And maybe some of us here, or maybe a lot of us here, like, there are human beings in your life, maybe your colleague, or your family, or your sibling, or your parent themselves, they're very negative people. And the solution is that you need to hold on to positivity. You need to, choose happiness and choose positivity, and choose not to be affected by negativity. You need to choose it, right? And that is really strength. And that's strength right there. Right? Strength that you choose to be a happy person. People hate you. Okay, I'm gonna be happy. I'm gonna choose to be happy. They can hate me all they want, right? But I'm not gonna be affected by that. Right? SubhanAllah, it's something that I really appreciate my mom for instilling in us since we're very young. To really, don't be affected by negative individuals. Just don't. You just choose to be happy. And that's it. And I was saying this to this person, but the thing that I guess, I don't know, I don't understand why people allow for other people to ruin their lives. I mean, why do you allow that? Why? Like, why would you do that? Right? SubhanAllah, and there was such the story Sheikh Hamza told before, 10 years ago, the story about this person, this woman, I think he was at an airport, right? And there was this, lady who was working at the immigration, right? And so the lady before Sheikh Hamza was kind of giving this immigration officer a really hard time, right? There are those people around, nowadays they call them Karens, right? Right, but anyway, those kind of people, they give workers or front desk workers really hard time. They complain, and they have all these sharp things they're gonna say, and like they're very unpleasant individuals. They go, I don't know how they live with themselves being so grumpy all the time, right? But basically this what do you call this, immigration officer was facing, right, the wrath of this individual, right? And the person stormed off, in anger. And then Sheikh Hamza came next, please passport out. And this, you could see clearly on the face of this woman, she was very upset. Of course, no one likes being scolded, right? No one likes being scolded, no one likes being abused, right? Or who enjoys it? No one does, right? So Sheikh Hamza, he saw the miskin, poor woman, right? She was very, very affected by that outburst of the other woman, like this kind of whereby they're controlling their tears to the point, right? That they're very affected. They're controlling their tears. Right? So Sheikh Hamza just said to her, and he gave a kind word. He gave a kind word. He said to her, you have something very precious in your heart. I remember this was of Sheikh Hamza. You have something very precious in yourself, and that is your heart, right? Don't let people like these enter, right? Don't allow you choose. Don't let this sort of people, this sort of attitude, sort of behavior enter your heart like that. Right? Your heart's precious. Okay, you control who comes into your heart. All right. Oh, mashallah. Push it out. Push it out. People are gonna be negative around you. Push it out. I push it out. It's really a choice. But it is an emotional strength, I would say. It's a mental strength, I would say, right? But it's really you gotta believe you can do it. And start doing your dhikr, doing your salawats, right? And fill yourself with positivity. Right. And that's the way. That's the way. Right. So first lesson, but you're going to decide if it's going to enter you, right? You're going to decide if this hatred or this unhappiness or depression or whatever is going to come into you because of somebody else. Why would you make yourself suffer because of someone else, right? Because someone else's illnesses or diseases of the heart. Why, right? You choose to not let yourself suffer as how our Prophet ﷺ used to be. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد. نعم. صلى الله إن شاء الله صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم خيرا. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أهله. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم خيرا. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أهله. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم خيرا. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أهله. الفاتحة. أن الله يجعلنا منافع وعمل خاص في وليس تعليم ودلالة على الهدى ويسر به قوم سيدنا أحمد وإلى أرواح معالمنا من شيخنا وذوي الحق علينا وإلى حضرة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين آمين يا رب العالمين.